Is everybody here?
Yeah.
Is anyone here? Okay. Ready to be creative? Is there anyone out there who wants? Can someone just yell out there? See if anyone wants to come back. Hi, everyone. Okay. So let's see if we have a parade of people coming back in. Anyone coming in? Okay, great. So I want to ask you a question. Can you really teach creativity? I mean, really? Come on. Isn't it like eye color or height? Isn't it something we're just born with? Some people more creative than others? How many of you think you can teach creativity? How many people think you can teach creativity? Raise your hand if you can teach creativity. Okay, how many people think you can't teach creativity? Okay, some of you. Okay, for those people who think you can teach creativity, how do you do it? How do you do it? You encourage it. You encourage creativity. Okay, what else? Yes? With methods. Okay, what methods?
Techniques.
With techniques. Okay? How else okay, can we get a little more specific? Encourage it, techniques.
Learning by doing.
Learning by doing. Here's the thing that's really interesting to me. If I asked you, how do we teach science or how do we teach math, you would have very specific answers. Because we all have a lot of experience being taught things like math and science and history. And the thing is, we aren't taught creativity. It is such a sad thing. And in fact, I am terribly embarrassed when I'm teaching classes on creativity to graduate students at Stanford, and this is the first time they have learned these things. They're angry because they realize these are things that would have helped them at every stage along the way in their life. And so I've been teaching classes on creativity and innovation for the last dozen years. And I'm going to tell you a secret. About 5 or 6 years ago, I decided I wanted to write a book that captured everything I knew about creativity. And I decided the working title of this book was Not Another Book About Creativity. Because I didn't want not one more book about creativity. And this is not just another book about creativity. And what happened is when I got a book contract and I started writing, I got to the end of the first draft and I said, you know what? This is just one more book about creativity. It's the same stuff. And I realized it really wasn't holding together. I had lots of specific things like learn by doing, encourage creativity, and a whole bunch of tools and techniques, okay? And that's what I've been teaching. I mean, I don't think I broke any of these students. I don't think I did anything terrible, but I realized I was looking at the problem at the wrong resolution. That I needed to open the aperture and look at creativity in a very different light. I realized that there's so many other things that affect creativity that are not just the things I was teaching in class, and that's why so many of us and so many of our students are really disappointed and frustrated that even though they learn all these tools, they actually can't apply them. So I created a model, which you can see here, which I call the innovation engine. And what I'm going to do over the next half hour is take it apart and put it back together again. And I promise you by the end you will have it memorized because it actually makes a lot of sense. And before I take it apart, I want you to notice there are two things about this innovation engine. There are two parts of it. There's the inside and there's the outside. The inside is you. Your knowledge, your imagination, and your attitude, or every individual's knowledge, attitude, and imagination. And the outside is the environment you're in, the resources, the habitat, and the culture. Okay? Now I want to ask you a favor. While you're listening to this, I want you to think about what things I'm telling you that are the most surprising, the most interesting, and the most valuable. I'm going to ask you at the end. So I'd like you to think about this while I'm giving the talk about what's most surprising, most interesting, most valuable. So let's start. Let's start where most people start. Where do you think most people start on this when they're thinking about creativity? Where do they start? Imagination. Okay, so let's start there. Now, the wonderful thing about imagination is that we are all incredibly imaginative. We are born imaginative. Have you ever met a little kid who isn't imaginative? I mean, all kids are imagination, and unfortunately our education system kind of beats it out of us, and then we have to kind of try to pour it back in later. But the fact is, when people say to me they're not creative, here's what I say to them. Did somebody give you a script for the day? Did someone give you a script for your life? The fact is, you are inventing your life every single moment. Every sentence you utter is an act of creativity, because no one's given you a script. I mean, we're inventing the future all the time, and it is an incredible disservice to not teach people how to actually invent their lives. So here's the problem. We go to school. Let's go back to kindergarten, okay? So in kindergarten, we're given problems like this. 5 plus 5. What's the answer to this problem? 10. You guys are great. Fabulous. 8 plus for this fellow over here. Now, how come we know that it's 10? We know this is 10 because there is one right answer to this problem. This requires convergent thinking. We all converged on the right answer. But you know what? You might say, well, of course, that's how you teach addition. 5 plus 5 equals what? But you can teach the same math concept in a different way that allowed young people who are learning these concepts to actually practice divergent thinking. What if we ask the question this way instead? What two numbers add up to 10? Now, how many answers are there to this problem? Infinite. Is that wonderful? I mean, that's actually incredibly profound, isn't it? In fact, it's when I was in my class and I came up with this example, that's when I realized I had a book to write, was this problem right here. The fact is, the way you ask the question dramatically affects the type of answers you get. The question you ask is the frame into which the answers fall. And if you don't ask the question the right way, you don't get the right set of answers. And so if we're always asking young people as they're growing up answers that have one right answer, questions of one right answer, you're only going to be prepared to answer questions that have one right answer. Now, this is profound in lots of different ways. I mean, consider the Copernican revolution. What did Copernicus do? Completely reframed the way he looked at the solar system. Instead of saying, let's have the Earth at the center, let's have the sun at the center. Completely shifted the frame, and it opened up the entire field of astronomy. Pretty amazing, right? Now, of course, artists do this, musicians do this. I mean, this is something that you can do every day. I mean, look, this is a picture by Escher. Escher invites us to try to play with background and foreground. This is a way of changing the way we're framing at every part of even within this picture. Now, the fun thing is you can do this every single day. And one of the best ways to practice framing and reframing problems is with jokes. Because jokes are almost always funny because the frame shifts right in the middle of the joke or right before the punchline. And that's what makes them funny, is that shift in frame. Let me give you an example, okay? So how many of you know the Pink Panther movies? Okay, so Pink Panther movies, so this is one of these classic scenes where the Pink Panther walks into a hotel, and he's talking to the hotel manager, and there's a little dog sitting on the carpet, and the dog is very cute, and he says to the manager, who can do it in their best French accent? Who can say, does your dog bite? Can anyone do that with a French accent? Can you do that, Soren? Okay, yes, exactly, good. Okay, and the manager says, well, no, my dog does not bite. And he reaches down to pet the dog attacks him. Go look on YouTube to see the scene, it's very funny. Dog attacks him, and he says, what happened? He says, well, that's not my dog, okay? Okay, I could tell you endless jokes, I mean, even knock-knock jokes are funny because they shift the frame. So you can practice this every single day, and it'll remind you of the importance of framing problems. Now, this is one of 3 ways I'm going to tell you about increasing your imagination. One is framing problems. The next is by connecting and combining things that are not obvious. Now, one of the most interesting things about creativity is that most people do not invent something out of the blue. They invent something that's a connecting other things. We think about Facebook. Okay, Facebooks. We've all had Facebooks when we were in college and when we were kids. There were paper Facebook, and Mark Zuckerberg said, let's put this online. Aha, a whole new, huge company grows out of basically connecting, combining things that hadn't been connected before. And this is really important, is that we don't have to tell our students or ourselves, you have to come up with something totally radical that no one's ever seen. You have to put things together in surprising ways. And a fun way to practice this is with the Japanese art of shindogu. How many people know what shindogu is? Okay, any of our Japanese friends here? Okay. Japanese art of shindogu is the art of creating useless inventions. They're not useful and they're not useless. They're unuseful, which kind of means that you're not quite sure what you might use them for, but there's a seed of something interesting. Let me give you some examples. Here's one, some shoes with some little umbrellas on them. Kind of interesting. You laugh probably because it's actually an interesting idea. It's surprising and it's interesting, right? What about, speaking of shoes, what about shoes with little dustpans on them? Okay, again, it's funny because there's something interesting. That's a clever idea. And maybe this isn't the exact implementation, but maybe there's something you could do here. And the last one I'll show you is a classic shindogu. Is a baby with a mop on its belly, so it finishes eating, and you put the baby on the floor, and it basically cleans up after itself. Okay? So again, there's a fun and very easy way to practice this every single day. Again, with humor. Now, how many of you read The New Yorker? I'm a huge New Yorker fan. When I was not sleeping last night, I was reading The New Yorker. Okay? Okay, The New Yorker, how many people read it? Only a few people? Okay, when you get The New Yorker, what's the first thing you do? What do you have to do? You have to open it up and you have to go to the back page, because on the back page, what is there? The cartoon caption contest. It's the first thing you have to look at, because what they have is a cartoon, and it doesn't have a caption, and it's a contest. You have to figure out what you would write. Now, in all cases, as in this one right here, in all cases, they put things together that are not obvious. Things that would be totally unlikely to have in the same frame. Things that are from very different parts of history, or things that are out of scale. All sorts of things that are surprising. So here, of course, you've got two businessmen and a little hobby horse. Kind of funny. And your job is to create some sort of storyline with a caption that ties them together. So does anyone have any brilliant ideas? Want me to show you what the caption that won this one was? It is, we'll start you out here, then give you more responsibilities as you gain experience. Okay? And it's funny because they've created a nice line between these things that were non-obvious. Okay, so the reframing problems, connecting, combining ideas, and the third way that I'm going to tell you about to increase your imagination is by learning how to challenge assumptions. Now, what does this mean? It means, first of all, unpacking what your assumptions are and essentially looking at them from a different set of, in a different way. But it also means going beyond the first right answer. This is a problem most people have when they're trying to come up with a creative solution. They have a problem, they come up with an answer, and they run with it. The problem is, most of the time when you come up with your first answer, it's kind of incremental, it's not really interesting, and it certainly isn't very innovative. So how do you teach people to do this? The way I do it in my classes is I give problems that don't have a right answer. In fact, they're problems that I've never seen before. I have no idea. I have no anchor. I have no idea what anyone's going to do, and there certainly is no one correct solution. So let me give you an example. This is actually an example of a project I did in Japan. What happened is my last book, which is called What I Wish I Knew When I Was 20, was really successful in Japan. And they asked me to come and teach some classes there because they said, oh, what the things you're doing at Stanford, they work with those Stanford students in Silicon Valley. This would never work in Japan. And I said, well, that's just ridiculous. Of course, your students are equally creative. Of course we'll work there. So here's what I did. I went to Japan. I ran a 2-hour, that's all, 2-hour creativity workshop. And then I gave them this challenge. I'm going to show you the exact design brief in a second. And they then had to turn in, this was at 5 o'clock at night, we were done. They had to turn in their results by 9 o'clock the next morning. So that's all the time they had. Here was the challenge. The challenge is they had to create as much value as possible, value measured in any way they wanted, starting with the contents of a trash can. Now, why did I pick this? Now, this was right after, very soon after the earthquake and tsunami and the nuclear power plant meltdown in Japan. And I really wanted to pick something that actually wasn't just frivolous, something that actually had a relatively profound message. So by taking something that people essentially felt like didn't even have zero value, it had negative value, right? Garbage, you pay people to take it away. It has negative value. And now you have to take that and turn it around and turn it into something that has more value. So, and to raise the bar further for these students, I went and I invited my colleagues. So obviously now you're all my new friends from all over Europe, all those people I didn't know before. Well, now I have your email addresses, so watch out, because what I did is I sent emails to all of my colleagues from the REE conferences, and I said to them, you want your students to participate in the challenge at the same time? So I ended up with students in Europe, in Asia, in Latin America, and the US, all participating at the same time. So the Japanese students knew that when they turned in their projects, they were also going to see at the same time the results from all over the world. So every team could pick whatever garbage can they wanted. How do you like to do this challenge? Sounds like fun? Who would want to do this? Come on. Okay, cool. So you want to see what some people did? Okay, so there's a team in Ecuador. I'm just going to show you 3 to give you a sampling of the sort of things that happen. Team in Ecuador started with a garbage can of yard waste. I probably would not have picked this garbage can. I mean, it wouldn't have occurred to me to pick the garbage can with the yard waste. So what did they do with this yard waste? What would you do with this yard waste? Art. That's what they did. They made a beautiful mural. Isn't that beautiful? Really interesting. They made this mural out of the yard waste. There was a team, I think, Alistair, this was your students, in a girl in Ireland. Isn't she your student? Totally amazing. She started with a bunch of old socks. Her mother had cleaned out her brother's sock drawer, and there were all these different colored black, white, gray socks, all with holes in them. How many of you just throw out yours holy socks? Okay. She took them, cut them up, sewed them back together, and made this sweater. Pretty cool? And then there was a group, I'm just going to show you one of them from Japan, although they were quite remarkable. This is a team that went to the laundromat, the dry cleaner, and they got all the plastic bags and hangers that, basically just keep getting thrown out. And of course, I'm sure all of our closets are kind of monuments of these plastic bags and hangers from the dry cleaner. And they realized there was a part of the campus which was called the dead zone, because this was at Osaka University. The grass was always a little wet, and the students didn't want to sit on it because it would get their clothes dirty and wet. So they created these mats that they put out, and they created a whole community around this area where no one ever used before. And they didn't stop there. They took these mats, which could get rolled up and put in their backpack and then rolled out again, and they put games on them. So this is a Twister. Who knew they played Twister in Japan? Okay, so they made Twister and chess and other games. So not only was it just a place to sit, they created a whole community. And then people started coming over and selling coffee, and they basically took this part of the campus that was abandoned and created a whole community around it. Pretty cool? So here's the thing. We've talked about imagination, how you can increase it with reframing problems, combining ideas, and challenging assumptions. Fabulous. The problem is, this is not enough. It's not enough to just teach people to be more imaginative. You need to start with a base of knowledge. Your knowledge is the toolbox for your imagination. And this is critically important. If I want to invent a new solar car or a cure for cancer, I need to start with an engineering degree or a biology degree. I need to have a base of knowledge with which to work. Otherwise, it's just science fiction. Does that make sense? And it's one of the reasons why so many of us come from technology backgrounds and schools of engineering, because we know that our students are getting this base of knowledge, and we're now trying to give them the other tools. But you need to start with this. And the problem is, if people think they can do it without the base of knowledge, they're going to be very disappointed. So how do you get knowledge? How do you get knowledge? Well, certainly you can listen to very inspiring lectures, you can read books, you can, go to school, you can do all of these things. But the best way to get knowledge is by paying attention. Think about the story yesterday where we had the student up here with the Guitar Hero for guitars. This probably came from an observation. Boy, I observed that he didn't read about this in a book, right? He didn't read, boy, there are people who are trying to learn the guitar who who would really love to use a game to do this. No, he watched people and realized that they got frustrated and said, boy, I could take the same concepts in one place again. Then he connected and combined ideas. Paying attention is key, and most people do not pay attention. We go through life with blinders on, but there are great ways to learn how to do this. And I think we'll get a little bit more from our magician friend a little bit later, so I won't steal his thunder. But one of my favorite ways is to get my students to go to places they've been to many times before and look at them with fresh eyes. Like I send them out to the Stanford Shopping Center with a lab, and they have to go to 6 different stores and spend at least 15, 20 minutes in each one, which is actually a pretty long time. And they have to pay attention to things like, was the door open or closed? What kind of music is playing? What does it smell like? How much time did it take for someone to come and greet them? Where are the most expensive items in the store? After they go through this extensive lab in each store, they realize they had never been paying attention before. And they never go into a new place without paying attention in a very different way. Now, one of my favorite stories about doing this, it didn't come from my class, it's from a colleague of mine, Bob Seelig, who is just a hoot. He is just a kick at Stanford. He teaches the med school. And anyway, he does everything. And one of the things he does is he leads trips to very remote places like Madagascar, the Galapagos, and teaches the students how to be naturalists. But he taught a class at Stanford called the Stanford Safari, okay? And he had the students basically act as though they were naturalists on the Stanford campus. And so they had to go and talk to everyone who had a different point of view about the Stanford. The pest controller, the organist, the librarian, the groundskeeper. They met with all the living Stanford presidents. They kept lab journals. By the time they finished this 2-week-long program, they knew more about Stanford than anybody else, certainly more than I do. And you know what? They walked away with an incredible appreciation for paying attention. So, we have imagination and knowledge, but that's not enough. Because if you do not have the attitude that you can solve the problem you're trying to solve, you are not going to solve it. This is actually really important. These are hard problems to solve, especially when you're dealing with big, daunting problems in the world, global warming or curing cancer. I mean, the fact is, if you are not motivated, driven, confident that you can solve that problem, you're not going to solve it. Unfortunately, most people view themselves as puzzle builders. They basically think of themselves as, my goal, I kind of have a puzzle and I see the box top and I know what I'm trying to build, and you're trying to get all the pieces in place to build that puzzle. Make sense? I don't know. I'm not going to ask you how many of you view yourself as puzzle builders. But you know what? What happens if you're a puzzle builder and you're missing a piece of the puzzle? What happens? You can't do the puzzle. You're screwed. Okay, that's a technical term. Okay? The fact is, entrepreneurs, innovators, people who are really ingenious, don't see themselves as puzzle builders, but as quilt makers. They basically leverage all the resources they have. Okay, Peter Kelly, where's Peter? Is it Peter around here somewhere? Okay, maybe he's off using his effectuation. The idea is using the resources you have at your disposal to build something that is truly remarkable. It's leveraging things you have as opposed to looking for the things that you just want. Make sense? Let me tell you a story that brings this to life. Peter Diamandis, who runs the X Prize Foundation, and he tackles huge projects like mining asteroids, okay, and rockets, manned rockets. And he walked into a colleague's office, and the colleague had Murphy's Law on the wall. What's Murphy's Law? If anything can go wrong, it will. Okay, say it loud. If anything can go wrong, It will. Why do we know that? Because we have been told this since we're kids, right? If anything can go wrong, it will. Well, he got so upset. He became livid. He went up, he took a big Sharpie, he crossed out "it will" and wrote, "Fix it." If anything can go wrong, fix it. And the idea is that's what real innovators do. They have the mindset, the confidence, the motivation to go beyond the thing to go, oops, didn't work, too bad, as expected, and they fix the problem. So, this is your internal combustion engine for creativity. Your knowledge is the toolbox for your imagination. Your imagination is the catalyst that transforms that knowledge into new ideas. And your attitude is the spark that sets us in motion. It's the fuel that gets it going, okay? So the wonderful thing is that we all have this internal combustion engine that we can use. But we're so frustrated often because we're in environments that squash this. How many of you have ever been in a place where, you're amazingly creative, okay? And then you work somewhere where you feel completely stultified. How many people have had that experience? Okay? The fact is you need to look at the outside of the innovation engine, okay? You can't look at this alone. So let's look at the outside. Let's start with habitat. Now, what is habitat? Habitat includes a bunch of things. It's the people with whom you work. It's the rules, the rewards, the incentives, the constraints. And, I talk about these actually, each one in a different chapter in my book, in Genius. But there's one thing that is really not obvious, that people often don't think about. Because these things like who you work with and the rules and rewards, these are things we know affect creativity. But what about the physical space? Okay, we start out as kids and we go to kindergartens that look sort of like this, that are playful and colorful. There are lots of manipulatives, right? Could you be creative in this type of environment? You bet. In fact, it looks a lot like this space, right? We are so fortunate for this conference to be in this amazing space. Every time I walk in here, I feel, as if I'm being given permission to do something really creative because the space invites it. So we have kids who are really creative in this space that fosters innovation. And then they're really, really successful in this environment. They graduate and they get to go to school here. And why are you laughing? Because it's true. How many of you have been in a classroom like this, either as a student or as a teacher? Okay? And then we get upset that our students aren't creative anymore. Isn't it sad? Our students are just not creative. The chairs are lined up in rows and columns. They're bolted to the floor. You get in trouble if you talk to someone else. I spent my entire youth writing "Silence is Golden." I was always in trouble. Can you imagine that? Okay, always in trouble for having something to say about whatever was going on. Okay, and you laugh. Okay, so the fact is we put people in these environments and then we get frustrated that they're not creative anymore. And then they graduate from these environments and they go to these environments. Okay? How many of you have ever worked in an environment like this? You know what? It makes me want to cry. I look now at a space like that and I really feel like the air gets sucked out of the room. And again, what happens in these environments, and when I ever do like exec ed workshops at companies that have spaces like this, and I say, we're talking about brainstorming, and I said, well, tell me about where would you brainstorm? They all know they have to get out of the building. So if you want people to be creative on an ongoing basis, and they say they have to go out of the building, you've got a problem. Now, the wonderful thing is that I have the opportunity to work in some really creative spaces. We have a brand new, really terrific building. You're all welcome to come visit us at Stanford in our new engineering center, but also at the D School. And at the D School, this is what a typical classroom would look like. They're always, all the furniture is almost all from IKEA. It's it's not expensive. It's not very precious. It can be easily replaced. Everything's on wheels. It all moves around. It's like a movie set. You can change things all the time. Lots of room for collaboration. These are actually pictures from my classroom. The students are using Play-Doh and markers. Looks like kindergarten. They're actually working on a very sophisticated problem here, as they are in this project. It's a simulation game using cards. And, look, they're very serious here. But the room can be completely reconfigured, and the students are literally working on the floor. Really innovative firms know this. They know that the space is the stage on which you play out your life. And so they need to create a stage, a space that communicates how they want people to act. Okay? So this is a picture from Google in Zurich, very playful environment. This is at Pixar, where they've got a big slide in the middle of the lobby. This is designed to communicate that creativity and playfulness are welcome. So this is the habitat. But that's not enough. You need to consider the resources that you have at your disposal. Now, what do I mean by resources? And it's interesting. Most people, when they think of resources, what do they think of when they think of resources? What's the first thing that... Money, right? I don't have enough money. Okay, money's great. We all love money. You know, I won't give back any checks that you want to throw my way. But money is one tiny piece of the puzzle when we look at resources. They're the natural resources we have around us. They're the processes we put in place. They're the communities and the people. I mean, think about it, Aalto here. The students are an incredible asset. Their imagination, their energy, they bring so much to the table. And one of the problems is that people are often trying to replicate the resources they see somewhere else, and they don't see the resources they have under their own nose. One of my favorite stories about this comes from a recent trip I had to Chile. And I was up in northern... Wow. Subway, okay. In California, we would say earthquake. Okay. Okay, that was just to wake everyone up. That subway's going to be a great resource you can leverage, right? That was right on to cue. Yeah, okay. So I was in northern Chile. How many of you have been in Chile? Any of you? Okay, super. Northern Chile. Up and on Chile, okay, just so to paint a picture, Chile is about this wide, literally about this wide, okay? And on one side is the ocean, 3,000 miles of ocean. Okay, 3,000, as long as the United States is wide of ocean. And just on the other hand, one hand to touch the ocean, the other touches the Andes, these spectacular mountains. Okay, I'm up in northern Chile, and I'm in a hotel, kind of conference room, and I'm working with these executives up in this town, and the town is very economically depressed. And I said, gee, what's getting in the way of your success? And this man turned to me and very earnestly said, our really horrible environment. And I'm looking out the window at the ocean and the other window at the Andes, and I'm thinking, are you not looking? What they were doing is comparing themselves to Silicon Valley, as opposed to saying, look at all the assets they had available. They could have done amazing things, and I still hope they do, with the assets they have available. So resources are important, and you need to look at the resources you have as opposed to trying to replicate something that someone else has. Next and last piece of the innovation engine is culture. Now, what do I mean by culture? Culture sort of embodies a whole lot of things that affect the way you feel, the way you think, the way you act in any environment. One of the things that is very important in a culture is a willingness to try lots of things, to keep what works, to fail, and to recover from failure. Have you ever been in an environment where it's okay to fail? You make mistakes and you go, ta-da! Okay, what about if you're in a place where it doesn't and nobody wants to do anything that's at all risky? Because if you fail, you're going to get in trouble. Really common, right? Well, one of my favorite stories about this type of thing comes from IDEO. And IDEO, the design firm, is masterful at doing really quick prototypes of things. They do lots and lots of product designs, but they test them out really fast. Now, here's the problem if you don't do this. So let me just explain. If you spend a huge amount of time designing a product, let's say I ask you to design a new game for me, okay, a video game. Okay, you're going to go out and you're going to hire engineers, you're going to designers, you're going to spend a bunch of time making this perfect, and then you're going to bring it to me. Okay? You've spent a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of engineering resources. Now you're fully committed to what you've done because you're kind of invested in it. You've also spent a lot of money, and it looks done, so it's unlikely that I'm actually going to even give you much feedback because it kind of looks done. But if you gave me something that was really raw and really crude and was really quick, you're not invested in it, right? You haven't spent a lot of money, and I'm going to probably give you feedback, okay? Let me give you an example, okay? So I've got some audio here, all right? This is the prototype for a game that IDEO designed called Monster Maker, okay? What this is a game for kids, an iPhone game. I want you to tell me when you look at this video how much time it took to do this, how much money it took, how much technical expertise, and how effective it is as a prototype to test this concept, okay? Ready? Okay.
Music. So this is possible dance moves for Monster Maker. So music starts, and I'm the player, so I come in, I touch the monster, and do these special dance moves. I have no idea. I just didn't want. And it can go for something I want. It has a few moves. And when I'm done dancing, I push the back button. Pauses and music stops. Monster Maker. Cool. Sonic. Come on, Sonic.
Okay, so how much time did this take to do? 5 minutes, okay. How much money did it cost? Just about zero, okay. How much technical expertise? Even I could do this, okay. And how effective is it at communicating what they were doing? Very. In fact, I was giving a talk, and one of the people in the audience had his kids in the room, and they're maybe around 8 or 10 years old, and they started crawling up during this thing, and afterwards they came up and they wanted to download the app. They saw this and wanted to buy it. That's a great prototype, okay? So being in an environment that is really supportive of experimentation and prototypes and doing things quickly is really important. But that's only one aspect of the culture. Culture is actually like the background music of an organization. It is so powerful. Think about the background music when you listen to a movie. It basically communicates how you should feel. And that's how powerful culture is. And I'm going to demonstrate this by playing 2 video clips. I'm going to play the same clip twice with 2 different types of music. And I want you to think about, actually don't think about, I want you to just feel. How does it feel? Do you want to be in the scene? What these clips are from a 1919 Coca-Cola bottling plant, okay? And they're each 1 minute long, and let's see how you feel with each one. Kind of fun, right? Kind of Disneyland. I want to be there. That looks interesting. How about this one? What do you think is in those bottles? Get the point? Is this pretty clear? How did it feel? Totally different? That's how powerful culture is. I had great fun making these. That was kind of fun. I encourage you to make some of these yourself because it's kind of really powerful to see the impact of the soundtrack on the video and how it totally changes the way you feel. So this is the external part of your innovation engine. And the thing is, these things all influence each other. The type of resources and the culture affects the habitats you build. The habitats you build are certainly affect the type of resources you have. But let's put the entire thing together and see how this works. This is your completed innovation engine. Now you might say, okay, Tina, that's very interesting, but why do you need this Mobius strip with everything braided together? You do. Because all of these things are intertwined and they all affect each other. Let me give you some examples. Imagination and habitat. The habitats we build are the external manifestation of our imagination. If you can't imagine it, you can't build it. And of course, our imagination is certainly affected by the type of habitats we create. Does that make sense? In addition, our knowledge and resources are parallel because the more we know, the more resources we can unlock. And the type of resources we have determines the things we know. For example, the more I know about fishing, the more fish I'm going to catch. The more fish there are in my environment, the more likely I am to know how to fish. I mean, I'm walking out this morning and I'm looking at all the boats. Why are there, a lot of people know how to sail here, right? Because there's a lot of water, okay? If you lived in the middle of a continent without any water around, it's unlikely you're gonna know much about sailing. And in Silicon Valley, we know a lot about venture capital because there are a lot of venture capitalists, okay? And the thing is, the more I know about it, the more I can unlock those resources. In addition, attitude and culture are parallel because our culture is a collective attitudes of the individuals in our community. And certainly our individual attitudes are affected by the culture. The wonderful thing is that all of these things affect each other, and you can start anywhere on this Mobius strip to get it going. Let me give you an example of how this works, okay? You want an example? I happened to be in northern Thailand just a few months ago and met this woman. Her name is Lek. And she started this elephant nature preserve. Now, her story is quite remarkable. She was a very, very poor girl when she was growing up. And her family had an elephant. And the elephant was like part of her family. And she loved this elephant. And as she got older, she realized how badly elephants in Thailand were treated in the mining industry, in tourism, in circuses. And she became profoundly passionate about doing something to protect these elephants. So here's what she did. She started with her attitude, her drive, her motivation to protect these elephants. She gained as much knowledge as she could, so her attitude was a spark to get her to learn as much as she could. She learned all about the types of things that they undergo, the sort of danger they're in, how many are still left in the wild. She leveraged the resources she had available, which were the elephants that are so injured that they were really like going to be put out, be put to death. They were injured elephants, injured in the mines, in the logging industry, because they would step on mines. She ended up creating a habitat, this elephant nature preserve, that essentially, using her imagination, she built this and invited people to come in and work there and to visit. And ultimately, she is changing the culture. Every person who goes there, including me. Alistair, were you there? You were there. Wasn't it incredible? It totally changed. The last time I was in Thailand, I rode an elephant. I would never ride an elephant again. And whenever I get to tell the story, I spread the story to other people. I am now part of her mission of changing everyone's attitude and changing the cultural response to these elephants. Make sense? The fact is, you can start in different places depending upon what your role is. If you're the manager of a company, you can create a habitat that stimulates the imagination of your employees. If you run the company, you can help set the culture that really changes people's attitudes. As an individual, you can start, especially if you're a student, by building your base of knowledge, because that's an incredible way to have a toolbox for your imagination. You can take classes on creativity and really learn how to, really enhance your imagination. You can start anywhere. And the fact is, we all have the key to our innovation engine, as do our students. It is up to us to show them how to turn the key. Thank you very much.